I'm Dania, 28 years old, and I was standing in my childhood home watching my entire family toast my brother Nathan's engagement when his fiancée Grace suddenly froze mid-sip. Her champagne glass trembled as she stared at me, recognition dawning in her eyes. "Wait!" she whispered, her voice cutting through the celebration like a knife. "You're the one who wrote those algorithms that saved my father's company from bankruptcy." The room fell silent, and my mother's perpetual look of disappointment finally began to crack. Before I continue the story, I'd love to know where you're watching from today. If you've ever felt overlooked or underestimated by your own family, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about triumph over adversity. What would you do if your family constantly called you a failure while you were secretly changing the world? Let's dive in to how one revelation at an engagement party exposed years of hidden success and family betrayal. Growing up in the Mitchell household meant living in a carefully constructed hierarchy where success was measured in degrees from Ivy League schools and salaries with multiple zeros. My mother, Sandra, a former beauty queen turned suburban socialite, had mapped out her children's lives before we could even walk. My father, Richard, a senior partner at a prestigious law firm, expected nothing less than excellence, or at least his narrow definition of it. At the top of their pride pyramid stood my brother Nathan, 30 years old, with his Harvard MBA gleaming like a trophy on our parents' mantle. He worked as an investment banker at Goldman Sachs, drove a Tesla, and lived in a Manhattan penthouse that cost more per month than most people made in a year. Then there was my sister, Madison, 25, and fabulous, who'd turned her trust fund into a thriving fashion boutique in Soho. She dressed like she'd stepped out of Vogue and made sure everyone knew her clothes were custom-made by up-and-coming designers. Her Instagram followers numbered in the hundreds of thousands, and Mother loved showing her friends Madison's latest Fashion Week photos. And then there was me, Dania, the family disappointment, who'd committed the unforgivable sin of dropping out of MIT after my sophomore year. 5 years ago, I'd made the decision that would forever brand me as the family failure. I'd been excelling at MIT, maintaining a perfect GPA in computer science, when a startup opportunity arose that I couldn't refuse. The founders had developed a concept that could revolutionize how artificial intelligence processed data, and they needed someone with my specific skill set. When I told my parents I was leaving school to join a company operating out of a garage, you'd have thought I'd announced plans to join a circus. Mother cried for 3 days straight, wailing about how I'd thrown away my future. Father threatened to cut me off financially, which he did, and Nathan sent me long emails about the importance of credentials in the business world. The startup folded within 8 months, but by then I'd learned more about real-world application of AI than any classroom could have taught me. I'd also made connections that led to remote consulting work, eventually becoming what the tech world calls a ghost architect, someone who solves impossible problems for companies while remaining completely anonymous. My family, however, only saw the dropout who now worked some computer job from her laptop. They never asked what I actually did, dismissing it as playing with computers or basic tech support. Our most recent Thanksgiving dinner had been particularly brutal. Mother had prepared her usual feast, but the main course seemed to be serving up my failures. Between passing the cranberry sauce and carving the turkey, she managed to list every way I'd disappointed them. 28 and still renting. She'd sighed dramatically, as if paying for my own apartment was somehow shameful. No husband, no prospects, and certainly no real career to speak of. Madison had chimed in with false concern, suggesting I try online dating while adjusting her designer dress. Maybe lower your standards a bit, Dania. Not everyone can date investment bankers like Nathan. Father had been more direct in his assessment. You know Nathan's colleague is looking for a personal assistant. It would be a step up from whatever it is you do now. The assumption that anything would be a step up from my current work stung, but I'd learned to swallow my rebuttals with my mashed potatoes. Nathan himself had offered to review my resume, convinced he could help me land an entry-level position somewhere respectable. It's never too late to start building a real career, he'd said, as if the last 5 years of my life had been an extended vacation. What they didn't know was that I'd spent that very morning finalizing a contract worth more than Nathan's annual bonus. A Fortune 500 company had been hemorrhaging money due to inefficient data processing, and my algorithm had solved their problem in 3 weeks. But sharing this victory would have meant explaining what I did, and experience had taught me they'd either dismiss it as exaggeration or demand proof they wouldn't understand. So I'd simply smiled, thanked Nathan for his concern, and changed the subject to his upcoming engagement party. Working remotely had its advantages beyond the obvious flexibility. It meant I could choose my clients, set my own hours, and most importantly, maintain the anonymity that had become my shield. In the tech world, I was known only by my initials and my work. DM had become something of a legend, the mysterious consultant who could solve problems others deemed impossible. But at family gatherings, I was just Dania, the dropout who lived in a modest apartment and drove a 10-year-old Honda Civic. The gap between their perception and my reality had grown so wide that bridging it seemed impossible. They worried about my future while I quietly secured theirs. They pitied my simple lifestyle while I found joy in work that actually mattered. They compared me unfavorably to my siblings while I revolutionized entire industries from my laptop. But I'd stopped trying to defend myself years ago, exhausted by their inability to see value in anything that didn't fit their narrow definition of success. It was easier to let them believe I was a failure than to constantly justify my choices to people who'd already made up their minds. 3 weeks after that miserable Thanksgiving dinner, I found myself pulling into the circular driveway of the Rosewood Country Club for Nathan's engagement party. My Honda Civic looked almost comedic, sandwiched between a pristine white Mercedes G-Wagon and a sleek black BMW M8. The valet's eyes flickered with barely concealed disdain as I handed him my keys, and I caught him moving my car to the far corner of the lot, safely away from the luxury vehicles that belonged here. I'd spent an hour getting ready, settling on a simple black dress I'd bought online for $30. It was clean, it fit well, and it was appropriate for the occasion. That should have been enough, but I knew it wouldn't be. Not in my family's world where appearances mattered more than substance. Taking a deep breath, I walked through the grand entrance, my modest heels clicking against marble floors that probably cost more than my annual rent. Mother spotted me immediately, her laser focus for imperfection zeroing in like a heat-seeking missile. "Dania, finally?" She said, her voice carrying that special mixture of disappointment and resignation she'd perfected over the years. Her eyes swept over my outfit with surgical precision. "Is that what you're wearing? I specifically said cocktail attire. And where's your date? Please tell me you didn't come alone again." Before I could respond, she was already steering me toward a group of relatives, her fingers digging into my elbow with practiced force. "Smile, darling. Try not to look so programmer-ish." I wanted to ask what exactly programmer-ish meant, but Aunt Cheryl was already upon us, air-kissing my cheeks while managing not to actually touch me. Uncle Frank followed his booming voice, announcing my arrival to anyone who'd missed it. Well, if it isn't our little computer whiz, still fixing laptops for a living, the extended family had gathered in full force, each armed with their own version of concern for my dire situation. Cousin Brittany, who'd recently gotten her real estate license after her third attempt, cornered me by the champagne table. "You know, Dania, I'm absolutely drowning in success right now. I could really use an assistant to help with paperwork and scheduling. It wouldn't pay much, but it would be steady work with growth potential." She said this while scrolling through her phone, presumably checking the Instagram likes on her latest post about being a boss babe. I politely declined, mentioning I had steady work already, which prompted her to pat my shoulder condescendingly. "That's sweet that you call it work, but I mean real employment with benefits and a future." Uncle Frank overheard and decided to throw his hat in the ring. "Speaking of real jobs, I've got an opening for a receptionist at the dealership. You'd be great at it. Sitting at a desk all day is basically what you do now, right?" The assumptions stung more than the offers. They pictured me in some dingy basement, fixing computers for minimum wage, probably eating ramen noodles and counting pennies. The irony was that I'd eaten lunch at my desk today too, but it was sushi from my favorite restaurant ordered, while finalizing a consultation contract that would pay more than Uncle Frank's receptionist made in 5 years. Nathan appeared then, his perfect smile gleaming as he led a stunning woman through the crowd. Grace Chen was everything my family valued, beautiful, accomplished, and from the right kind of family. Her father owned Chen Technologies, a name I recognized immediately, though. I kept my expression neutral. Nathan introduced her with the pride of someone showing off a prize, mentioning her role as CFO like it was a rare collectible he'd acquired. Grace graduated summa cum laude from Wharton. Mother gushed, shooting me a meaningful look. "And she's already a CFO at 28. Isn't that remarkable?" The comparison was as subtle as a sledgehammer. Here was another 28-year-old woman doing everything right, while I remained the family cautionary tale. Grace herself seemed lovely, shaking hands warmly, and appearing genuinely interested when asking about everyone's lives. When she got to me, Nathan's introduction was notably brief. "This is my sister Dania. She works in tech support." Grace's eyes lit up with interest. "Oh, tech, what area specifically?" But Mother quickly intervened, laughing that tinkling laugh she used to smooth over embarrassment. Oh, Dania fixes computers like a repair person. Very practical. The conversation moved on before I could correct her, which was probably for the best. Explaining that I architected AI solutions for major corporations would have sounded like desperate overcompensation, so I sipped my champagne and smiled, playing the role they'd cast me in years ago. As the cocktail hour progressed, various relatives took turns offering me life advice I hadn't asked for. My mother's sister Helen suggested I consider going back to school, perhaps for an associate's degree in something practical. Medical billing is very stable, she assured me. Cousin Jerome, who'd failed the bar exam twice before finally passing, lectured me about the importance of persistence and formal education. The irony of receiving career counseling from people who knew nothing about my actual career wasn't lost on me, but pointing it out would have been cruel. Madison floated by in a stunning designer gown, pausing just long enough to assess my outfit with a pitying smile. "Target?" she asked, though we both knew it wasn't really a question. "You know I could get you a discount at some better stores. Image matters, Dania, especially when you're trying to climb out of, well, your situation." My situation. That's what they called my life, like it was a temporary ailment I was suffering from, rather than a deliberately chosen path. They couldn't fathom that someone might find fulfillment in work they didn't understand, might measure success by impact rather than appearances. In their world, success was visible, tangible, something you could photograph and frame. My achievements lived in servers and algorithms, in problems solved and disasters averted, invisible to anyone who didn't know where to look. As dinner was announced and we moved toward the ballroom, I caught sight of myself in a gilded mirror. Surrounded by designer gowns and expensive suits, I did look out of place. But for the first time, I realized that wasn't necessarily a bad thing. I'd never fit into their world, and trying to force myself into their mold had only brought misery. My simple dress and modest appearance were authentic to who I was, someone who valued substance over style, impact over image. Taking my assigned seat at the family table, notably placed at the far end, away from the happy couple, I prepared myself for what promised to be a long evening of toasts to Nathan's success and Grace's perfection. What I didn't know was that Grace was about to unknowingly detonate a truth bomb that would shatter every assumption my family had made about me. The champagne flutes clinked like wind chimes as Father rose from his seat at the head table, his presence commanding the attention of the 150 guests packed into the country club's ornate ballroom. He'd prepared his speech on index cards, though we all knew he'd abandoned them for the theatrical delivery he'd perfected in countless courtrooms. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice carrying that perfect blend of authority and warmth he reserved for public performances. "We're gathered here to celebrate not just an engagement, but the union of two exceptional individuals who represent everything we value in this family." His eyes swept the room, lingering on Nathan with unmistakable pride. "My son Nathan has exceeded every expectation we've set for him. Harvard Business School, Goldman Sachs, and now preparing to make partner before 35. The crowd murmured appreciatively, and I noticed several young women at neighboring tables eyeing Nathan with renewed interest. Father continued his chest, puffing slightly, and my daughter Madison, whose boutique was just featured in Vogue as one of New York's hidden gems. Madison preened at the mention, adjusting her custom gown so the photographers could capture her best angle. The pause that followed was deafening in its silence. Father's gaze passed over me like I was an empty chair, moving on to praise Grace and her family's accomplishments. "Success," he concluded, raising his glass, "is not just about what we achieve, but about maintaining the standards that define us. To Nathan and Grace, may your union continue the tradition of excellence that both families represent." Everyone drank, the moment feeling like swallowing glass for me. Mother dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief, playing the part of the emotional matriarch perfectly. Nathan kissed Grace. Madison captured it all on her phone for social media, and I remained frozen in my seat, invisible as always. Grace rose next, her movements graceful, despite what must have been enormous pressure. She was everything my family wanted me to be: polished, credentialed, and visibly successful. Her voice carried a different quality than my father's practice boom, something more genuine despite the formal setting. "Thank you all for being here," she began, making actual eye contact with guests rather than performing for them. "I want to share something personal about why this moment means so much to me, and it starts with nearly losing everything I'd worked for." The room shifted, suddenly attentive in a way that went beyond polite interest. Grace's fingers found Nathan's hand, squeezing it as she continued. 2 years ago, my father's company, Chen Technologies, was weeks away from bankruptcy. We'd overextended on a development project, our algorithms were failing, and our biggest clients were pulling contracts. 500 employees were about to lose their jobs, and my father was considering selling our patents to competitors just to cover severance packages. I felt my stomach clench. I knew this story, but from a very different perspective. Grace's voice grew stronger as she continued. We'd hired every consultant we could afford, brought in teams from Silicon Valley, even reached out to my former professors at Wharton. Nothing worked. The problem was too complex, they said. Our legacy systems were too entangled with the new infrastructure. We were advised to cut our losses and fold. She paused, taking a sip of champagne, and I found myself holding my breath, even though I knew how this ended. Then, through what seemed like pure chance, we connected with someone who called themselves a ghost architect. They worked remotely, communicated only through encrypted emails, and signed everything with just 2 initials DM. My heart rate spiked as several tech-savvy guests murmured recognition. The name DM had become something of a legend in certain circles. This person, Grace continued, her voice filled with genuine emotion, didn't just solve our technical problems. They revolutionized how we understood our entire system. In 3 weeks working entirely remotely, they created algorithms that not only saved us from bankruptcy, but increased our processing efficiency by 400%. 400%. She emphasized each word, letting the magnitude sink in. Our clients came back. We hired more employees. My father's company went from near death to industry leader. The technical details she shared next made my palms sweat. She was describing my work with perfect accuracy, outlining the specific approach I'd taken to untangle their legacy code and implement machine learning protocols that adapted in real time. Most of the audience probably didn't understand the specifics, but they understood the reverence in her voice. We tried to find this person, Grace said, her eyes beginning to scan the room systematically. We wanted to offer them a permanent position equity, anything they wanted, but they refused everything except their consulting fee, which they asked us to donate to coding boot camps for underprivileged youth instead. Murmurs of surprise rippled through the crowd. In a room full of people who measured worth in dollar signs, turning down money was incomprehensible. The only traces they left were in the code itself. Grace continued, and I realized with growing alarm where this was heading. Timestamp signatures, specific syntax patterns, a particular way of annotating that was like a digital fingerprint. I've spent 2 years studying that code, trying to understand not just what this person did, but how they thought. It was like reading poetry written in Python elegant solutions that shouldn't have been possible. Her scan of the room was methodical now, and I tried to shrink into my chair. But it was too late. Her gaze reached our family table, passed over my parents, and Madison lingered on Nathan and then found me. The champagne flute in her hand trembled slightly as recognition dawned in her eyes. She'd seen something some tell that I couldn't even identify in myself. The consultant, she said slowly, her voice carrying across the now silent ballroom, insisted on anonymity. They said recognition wasn't the goal, impact was. They said... Her voice caught, and I saw the exact moment when all the pieces clicked into place for her. They said real success was measured and problem solved, not credit taken. Those were my exact words from one of our email exchanges. I'd written them after she'd pressed again about meeting in person, trying to explain why I preferred to remain anonymous. Now hearing them repeated in this room, full of people who'd never understood that philosophy, they sounded both foreign and familiar. Grace's eyes hadn't left mine. The entire room seemed to follow her gaze, hundreds of eyes turning toward the forgotten Mitchell sister at the far end of the family table. DM, she whispered, though the acoustics carried it perfectly. Dania Mitchell. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the waitstaff had frozen, mid-stride champagne bottles suspended in air. I felt exposed in a way that years of anonymity had protected me from my carefully constructed walls crumbling under the weight of a truth I'd never intended to share. Nathan laughed nervously, the sound sharp in the quiet room. Grace, honey, I think you're confused. Dania does basic computer repair. She couldn't possibly... But Grace wasn't listening to him. She was walking toward me now, her designer heels clicking against the floor in a rhythm that matched my racing heart. The crowd parted like she was Moses, and they were the Red Sea, everyone wanting to see what would happen next. When she reached me, her eyes were bright with a mixture of awe and something that looked like vindication. The timestamp signatures, she said quietly, though everyone strained to hear. You always code between 2 and 5 a.m. Pacific time. The commenting style, using haikus for complex functions, the way you nest your conditionals, it's you. She pulled out her phone with shaking hands, showing me an email thread I recognized immediately. Tell me I'm wrong. I couldn't. Not with her looking at me like I'd hung the moon, not with my family staring in various stages of disbelief, not with the truth finally clawing its way into the light after years of hiding. My silence was answer enough. "Oh my God!" Grace breathed, and then louder, turning back to the stunned crowd. "Do you people have any idea who this is? This is DM, the ghost architect, the person Tech Weekly called the most influential unknown programmer of the decade. She's saved dozens of companies, revolutionized entire industries, and she's been sitting at your family table being treated like—" She trailed off, but the implication hung heavy in the air. Like a failure, like a disappointment, like someone who needed career advice from relatives who couldn't even understand what she did. The truth had finally entered the building, and it was about to demolish every assumption my family had built about me. Mother's voice cut through the stunned silence like a rusty blade. "This is obviously some sort of misunderstanding," she said, rising from her chair with the forced composure of someone watching their worldview crumble. "Dania works in computer repair. She fixes laptops at some shop downtown. Tell her, darling." She looked at me with eyes that begged me to confirm her version of reality, to maintain the narrative she'd been telling her friends for years. Grace turned to my mother with an expression I'd never seen directed at Sandra Mitchell before, disappointment mixed with barely contained anger. "Computer repair?" She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Your daughter is DM. Do you understand what that means? Companies pay millions just for a consultation. She's turned down positions at Google, Apple, Microsoft. She could buy and sell half the people in this room." "That's ridiculous!" Madison interjected, her voice shrill with denial. "Dania lives in a studio apartment and drives a beat-up Honda. If she had millions, don't you think we'd know?" The irony of my fashion designer sister, who posted every designer purchase on social media, not understanding that some people didn't advertise. Their wealth was almost amusing. Grace pulled up something on her phone, her movements sharp with frustration. "Tech Weekly March issue," she read aloud. "The mysterious DM strikes again, saving Hartwell Industries from certain collapse with an elegant algorithm that industry experts are calling impossibly brilliant. The consultant, who maintains strict anonymity, has now been linked to successful interventions at over 15 major corporations." Nathan stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "Grace, you're embarrassing yourself. And more importantly, you're embarrassing me. My sister dropped out of MIT. She couldn't possibly be this person you're describing." His face was flushed, whether from alcohol or humiliation I couldn't tell. "Dropped out of MIT," Grace repeated slowly, as if tasting the words. "Did any of you ever ask, why did you consider that maybe, just maybe, she had opportunities that couldn't wait for graduation?" She turned back to me, her expression softening. The Chen Technologies timestamp was April 15th, 2 a.m. Pacific. I remember because I was in the office watching the preliminary results come in. "Were you in your studio apartment then coding on that laptop your family thinks you use for repairs?" I finally found my voice, though it came out quieter than intended. "Grace, please, this isn't the time or place." But years of silence had built up pressure that demanded release, and Grace wasn't backing down. "When is the time, Dania? When they're suggesting you become someone's assistant, when they're offering you receptionist jobs?" Her voice rose with each question. "These people should be begging you for advice, not the other way around." Uncle Frank laughed nervously. "Come on now, if Dania was some tech genius, she'd tell us. Family doesn't keep secrets like that." He looked at me with the expression of someone waiting for the punchline to a joke. "Doesn't it?" I heard myself say, and the room seemed to lean in. Like when Madison's boutique was mysteriously saved by an angel investor who never wanted to meet, or when Nathan's MBA loans were suddenly paid off by what he thought was a merit scholarship. The color drained from both my siblings' faces. Madison's hand went to her throat, fingering the designer necklace she'd bought with profits from a business that should have failed. "That was you." Shell company called Phoenix Investments for Madison. I confirmed, feeling strangely detached from my own words. Educational Excellence Foundation for Nathan. Mom and Dad's mortgage during the recession Zenith Holdings. Every time this family needed saving, I saved it, anonymously, because being family meant helping without expecting recognition. Father's legal training kicked in his voice, taking on the cross-examination tone I'd heard him practice countless times. "You expect us to believe that our dropout daughter has been secretly wealthy this entire time? That's quite a convenient claim to make without proof." Grace had apparently reached her limit. She connected her phone to the ballroom's presentation system with a few swift taps. Suddenly, the massive screens meant for displaying engagement photos showed a LinkedIn profile. I'd forgotten existed, hidden under a pseudonym I'd used for professional networking. The credentials made several guests gasp. 15 patents in machine learning and AI. Grace read her voice carrying clearly through the sound system. Advisory board positions at 6 Fortune 500 companies. Keynote speaker at DEF CON, virtually of course, because DM never appears in person. Published papers that are required reading in graduate programs worldwide. She swiped to show a partial photograph from MIT's Tech Review, my face partially visible behind a laptop screen. Estimated net worth, according to Tech Insider, conservative estimate of $40 million, though likely much higher given the anonymous nature of most contracts. "This is insane," Nathan said, but his voice had lost its certainty. He was staring at the screen showing a paper I'd published on algorithmic efficiency that had apparently become foundational in his own field. "I've cited this work. My team at Goldman uses these principles. You're telling me my sister wrote this." "Your sister revolutionized how we understand data processing?" Marcus Chen's voice boomed from the entrance. Grace's father had arrived late, still in his travel clothes, but his timing couldn't have been more dramatic. He walked straight to me, his eyes bright with emotion. "Ms. Mitchell, I've wanted to thank you personally for 2 years. You didn't just save my company, you saved 500 families from financial ruin." He turned to address the room, his presence commanding attention in a way that made my father's earlier speech seem like amateur theater. "This woman refused a $10 million payment and asked us to donate it to coding education for underprivileged youth instead. She worked 18-hour days for 3 weeks, revolutionized our entire infrastructure, and then disappeared like smoke. Do you know what that kind of talent is worth in Silicon Valley?" "But she lives in a studio apartment," Mother said weakly, grasping at the last straws of her constructed reality. "By choice," I said, finally finding my full voice. "I like my apartment. It's quiet, close to the coffee shop where I do my best thinking, and I don't need more space. Not everyone measures success in square footage, Mother." Aunt Cheryl was frantically Googling on her phone, her eyes widening with each search result. "Oh my God, the software my company uses. We paid $2 million for it last year. It says here it was developed by DM Industries." She looked up at me with something approaching fear. We use your software." "Probably," I admitted. "I've licensed solutions to about 60 companies in various industries, retail, healthcare, finance. Uncle Frank, your dealership uses my inventory management system. You praised it at last year's Christmas dinner, said it saved you 6 figures annually." The revelation rippled through the crowd like a stone dropped in still water. Phones appeared at every table as guests searched for information about the mysterious DM, finding breadcrumbs I'd left across the digital landscape. The atmosphere shifted from celebration to something more complex, awe-embarrassment, and a desperate scramble to reframe their understanding of the Mitchell family dynamic. Wyatt Madison asked, her voice small. "Why didn't you tell us we're your family?" The question hung in the air, loaded with years of assumptions and dismissals. I looked at each of them, seeing not the powerful, successful people they projected to the world, but the family who'd never bothered to see me for who I really was. "Because you never asked," I said, simply. "You told me who I was instead. Every gathering, every dinner, every conversation, Dania the dropout, Dania the failure, Dania who needs career advice, dating help, fashion tips. You created a version of me that fit your narrative, and nothing I said could change it. So I stopped trying." Nathan's face had gone through several shades of red and was now settling on a mottled purple. "You made me look like a fool. All these years offering to help you, trying to guide your career. You made yourself look like a fool," Grace said coldly, and I realized their engagement might not survive this revelation. "You have a genius sister who revolutionized entire industries, and you couldn't see past your own ego long enough to notice. That's not her failure, Nathan. It's yours." The confrontation had reached its crescendo, but we were far from finished. The truth was out, but my family's reaction to it would prove even more revealing than their years of dismissal. As the ballroom erupted in chaos, with guests filming on their phones and my family struggling to process the impossibility of my success, I realized that anonymity hadn't just been a preference. It had been a protection. And now, stripped of that shield, I would finally see my family's true colors. The ballroom door opened again, and Marcus Chen commanded the room's attention as he strode purposefully toward our family table. His presence was magnetic, the kind of natural authority that came from building an empire from scratch. Several guests recognized him, immediately whispers of Chen Technologies and billionaire rippling through the crowd. He reached me, and to everyone's shock, bowed slightly in a gesture of profound respect. "Dania," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "I've carried a photo of my employees' families in my wallet since the day you saved us. 500 people who still have jobs, Mortgages being paid, children in college, all because of you. He pulled out his phone, showing a collage of smiling faces at what appeared to be a company picnic. My daughter, Grace, knows the technical side of what you did, but I know the human side. You gave us hope when every expert said we were finished. Mother attempted to interject, her social training kicking in despite her visible panic. Mr. Chen, I think there's been some confusion. Dania does freelance computer work, nothing on the scale you're describing. Her smile was brittle, desperate to maintain some control over the narrative that was spiraling away from her. Marcus looked at her with barely concealed pity. Mrs. Mitchell, your daughter donated her entire $10 million fee to establish coding boot camps in underserved communities. We've graduated 300 students so far, all employed in tech now. He pulled up photos on his phone showing classrooms full of eager students. She insisted on anonymity, but we named it the DM Initiative. Every graduate knows they owe their career to someone who believed in giving opportunities, not hoarding them. $10 million! Father's voice cracked his courtroom composure, finally shattered. He stared at me as if seeing a stranger. You gave away $10 million! It wasn't about the money, I said quietly. It never was. Chen Technologies needed saving. Those students needed opportunities. I had the skills to help with both. I looked at Nathan, whose face had gone pale. Remember when you lectured me about building wealth at Christmas? You said I'd never understand financial success. I understood. I just defined it differently. Grace had moved to stand beside her father, her engagement ring catching the light as she gestured. Show them the others, Dad. Show them what their failure of a daughter has really been doing. Marcus nodded, connecting his phone to the presentation system Grace had already accessed. The screens filled with a cascade of information that made the room gasp collectively. Hartwell Industries. He began showing a news article. Manufacturing company, 30,000 employees. DM redesigned their supply chain algorithm, saving them from outsourcing overseas. The next slide showed grateful employees holding a banner reading, "Thank you, DM." Morrison Healthcare Systems. Their patient data was being ransomed by hackers. DM not only recovered it, but built them an impenetrable security system that's now the industry standard. Each revelation hit my family like physical blows. Madison sank into her chair as Marcus showed how her boutique's inventory system, the one she bragged about to fashion magazines, was part of a larger retail solution I'd developed. The angel investor had also provided the technology that made her success possible. Sterling Financial. Marcus continued relentlessly. Nathan, I believe that's where you interned. They used DM's risk assessment algorithm, the one that caught the Pemberton fraud before it could destroy pension funds. That was your sister's work. She saved thousands of retirees from poverty. Nathan's hand shook as he reached for his champagne, missing the glass entirely. The Pemberton case made my career. I was on the team but we used... His voice trailed off as the implications hit him. He'd built his reputation on my algorithm's success. There's more! Grace said, her voice cold with controlled fury. Tell them about the hospitals, Dad. Tell them about the children. Marcus's expression softened as he pulled up a presentation that looked different from the corporate successes. These were photos of pediatric wards, tired doctors, worried parents. Children's hospitals nationwide were struggling with diagnostic delays, he explained. Rare conditions were being missed, treatments delayed. DM created an AI system that cross-references symptoms with global medical databases in real time. It's caught conditions doctors missed, saved lives that would have been lost. His voice grew thick. My nephew was diagnosed with a rare metabolic disorder thanks to this system. He's alive because of your daughter's work. Tears were flowing freely among the guests now, but my family sat frozen in their shame. Uncle Frank finally broke the silence, his usual bluster completely deflated. The dealership software. I won an industry award for our efficiency. I gave a speech about my business acumen. He looked at me with dawning horror. It was you. It was all you. The software was you, I corrected gently. The implementation, the customer service, the business relationships, that was all your work. I just gave you better tools. But he shook his head, unable to accept the kindness he didn't deserve. Cousin Brittany's real estate app, the one she'd bragged about having custom developed, appeared on the screen next. BK Reality Solutions. Grace read, developed pro bono by DM Industries for new real estate agents who couldn't afford premium software. Brittany's face went scarlet as she realized her exclusive app was actually charity from the cousin she'd tried to hire as an assistant. Why are you doing this? Mother suddenly shrieked, her composed facade finally cracking completely. "Why are you humiliating us like this?" The question was so tone-deaf, so typically her, that several guests actually laughed. "Humiliating you." Grace stepped forward, her designer heels clicking sharply. "Your daughter has been changing the world while you've been embarrassed by her apartment and car. She's saved companies, saved lives, funded education, and all you can think about is your own humiliation." She turned to Nathan with disgust. "This is your family. These are the values you were raised with." Marcus pulled up one final presentation, and I recognized it immediately. My stomach dropped as I realized what he was about to reveal. "This morning," he said quietly, "Forbes released their annual list of most influential people in tech. They included a special section on anonymous innovators. The screen showed my code name at number 3 with an estimated impact value that made several guests gasp. Your daughter is ranked above Elon Musk in terms of actual problem-solving impact, but you offered her a receptionist job." The truth hadn't just unfolded, it had detonated like a nuclear bomb in the middle of my family's carefully constructed social hierarchy. As cameras continued to flash and record, as guests whispered and pointed, as my family sat in the wreckage of their assumptions, I realized this was only the beginning. The confrontation was over, but their desperate attempts to rewrite history were about to begin. Looking around the room, at the mix of awe, shame, and shock on faces that had dismissed me for years, I felt something I hadn't expected: peace. The truth was finally out, and whatever happened next, I would never have to hide again. But my family's reaction to being exposed would prove that sometimes the truth doesn't set everyone free. Sometimes it just reveals who they really are. The transformation was instantaneous and shameless. Mother's tears, which had been flowing from humiliation moments before, suddenly became tears of joy as she rose from her chair with the grace of a seasoned performer. "My brilliant daughter," she announced to the room, her voice carrying the same false warmth she used when networking at charity galas. I always knew she was special. Even as a child, I could see the genius in her. Why do you think I pushed her so hard? Every criticism, every tough conversation, it was all to motivate her to reach this extraordinary potential. The revisionist history was so blatant that several guests actually scoffed. Aunt Cheryl's daughter, who'd been recording everything on her phone, muttered, "That's not what you said at Thanksgiving," loud enough for nearby tables to hear. But Mother was in full damage control mode, weaving a narrative from whole cloth with the desperation of someone watching their social status evaporate. "Remember Richard?" She turned to my father, who looked like he was calculating legal strategies in his head. "How we used to stay up worrying about how to channel Dania's gifts. We knew traditional paths wouldn't suit her unconventional genius. That's why we supported her decision to leave MIT." The lie was so outrageous that Grace actually laughed out loud. Father cleared his throat. His courtroom training, allowing him to pivot more smoothly than Mother. "Naturally, we've always been proud of Dania's unique approach to success. We simply respected her wish for privacy. Discretion is, after all, a Mitchell family value." He attempted his signature authoritative smile, but it looked more like a grimace. "I specifically remember encouraging her interest in computers. Bought her that laptop for Christmas, didn't I, sweetheart?" "You bought me a calculator," I corrected flatly. "The laptop I saved for myself working at the campus bookstore. You said computers were a waste of time for someone who should be pre-med." The truth hung in the air like a blade cutting through his fabrication. Nathan, seeing an opening, tried a different approach. "Dania, why didn't you tell us?" His voice aimed for hurt rather than anger, attempting to shift the narrative to my betrayal rather than their blindness. "We're family. We could have celebrated your success together. Did you think so little of us that you couldn't share this part of your life? Every Christmas." I began, my voice steady, despite years of suppressed frustration bubbling up. Mom would ask when I was going to get a real job. Every birthday, Madison would gift me self-help books about finding your passion. Every Thanksgiving, the entire family would offer career advice for their struggling relative. Easter 2019, Uncle Frank suggested I try multi-level marketing. 4th of July 2020, Aunt Cheryl offered to set me up with her hairdresser's son because beggars can't be choosers. Labor Day 2021. Nathan explained cryptocurrency to me for 3 hours because he assumed I didn't understand technology. Each memory landed like a precision strike. Madison attempted tears, a skill she'd perfected in high school to get out of trouble. "We're sisters," she said, reaching for my hand across the table. I pulled back, noting how her mascara remained perfectly intact. "Sisters share everything. I would have been so proud to tell people my sister was a tech genius. Think of the connections we could have made together, the opportunities. You posted a TikTok calling me dropout Dania, I reminded her. It got 50,000 views. You used my MIT sweatshirt as a prop while joking about expensive failures. Should I have shared my success then? Or when you told your influencer friends I was your charity case sister, who you were trying to help find herself? Grace's father had been watching this performance with increasing disgust. "This is extraordinary," Marcus said, his voice cutting through Madison's attempted response. "Your daughter saves your home from foreclosure funds, your businesses ensures your success. And now you want to claim you supported her all along." He looked at my parents with the kind of contempt usually reserved for business rivals. "I've seen shameless behavior in boardrooms, but this is something special. We did support her," Mother insisted, her voice rising with false indignation. "Just because we expressed concern about her choices doesn't mean we didn't love her. Every parent worries. We just wanted what was best for her." She dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief, playing to the crowd that was no longer buying her performance. "You wanted what looked best," I corrected. "There's a difference. Nathan's Goldman Sachs business card looked impressive at your book club. Madison's fashion shows gave you Instagram content. My algorithms couldn't be displayed on your mantle or bragged about at the country club, so they didn't exist to you." Cousin Brittany, emboldened by desperation, and wine made her move. "Dania, sweetie, we're practically sisters. Remember how close we were as kids?" We had never been close. She'd once locked me in a closet during hide and seek and left me there through dinner. "I'm starting a new venture, actually. A tech-focused real estate platform. We could be partners, family supporting family, right?" "The app you've been using for 2 years already has everything you're describing," Grace interjected coldly. "The one Dania built for you for free. Though I'm betting you charged your clients for proprietary technology access, didn't you?" Uncle Frank wasn't far behind with his pitch. "You know, Dania, I've always seen potential in you. That's why I offered you that position. It wasn't just receptionist work, it was a foot in the door to the family business. With your skills and my industry knowledge, we could revolutionize auto sales. Partners 50-50. Family first, am I right? 60-40. Father interjected, unable to help himself, even in his desperation. "She'd be using the Mitchell name after all." The fact that he was already negotiating terms for a partnership in my hypothetical business venture was so absurdly on brand that I almost laughed. "The Mitchell name?" Marcus asked with dangerous softness. "The name she's had to hide, to be taken seriously, the name associated with people who spent years diminishing her achievements. That Mitchell name," Mother, sensing the complete loss of narrative control, made one last desperate play. She stood abruptly, moving toward me with arms outstretched. "Dania, darling, we need to talk about this as a family, privately. These people don't understand our dynamic, how we show love through challenge and expectation." She reached for me, but I stepped back, maintaining distance. "Our dynamic?" I asked. "You mean the one where Nathan gets praised for participation trophies while I get criticized for not displaying achievements you never asked about? Where Madison's every Instagram post gets family likes and comments, but my published papers that you never knew existed wouldn't have merited a mention? That dynamic? You're twisting everything," Nathan accused, his face flushed with anger and embarrassment. "Making us look bad in front of everyone. Is this your revenge? Humiliating your family because we didn't worship at your altar of secret success?" "I didn't reveal anything," I pointed out calmly. "Grace recognized me. I was perfectly content to remain invisible at this engagement party, just like every other family gathering. You're not upset about being humiliated? You're upset about being exposed?" The room had become a theater of judgment, every guest witnessing the Mitchell family's spectacular fall from grace. Phones captured every moment, every desperate grab for connection to my success, every shameless revision of history. My family had spent years building their image of perfection, and in trying to claim credit for achievements they'd dismissed, they were destroying it more thoroughly than any enemy could have. "Please," Mother said, her voice dropping to a whisper that still somehow carried to every corner of the silent room. "We're your family. Whatever mistakes we made, surely you can forgive us. Surely you can share your success with the people who raised you." The plea might have worked once back when I still craved their approval. But standing there watching them scramble to rewrite history, seeing their love suddenly appear when money was involved, I realized that some bridges weren't meant to be rebuilt. They were meant to be lessons in what happens when you only value what glitters, missing the gold that was there all along. The silence that followed Mother's plea was deafening. Every eye in the ballroom focused on me, waiting for my response. I looked at each member of my family, seeing them clearly for perhaps the first time. Not as the towering figures of success I'd tried so hard to impress as a child, but as people so trapped in their narrow definitions of worth that they'd missed everything that actually mattered. You want me to forgive you? I began, my voice calm and clear, carrying the weight of years of careful observation. But forgiveness requires acknowledgement of harm, and you still don't see it. You're not sorry for how you treated me. You're sorry you were wrong about my value. There's a profound difference. I turned to my parents first, the architects of this dysfunctional dynamic. Mom, Dad, do you remember when you almost lost the house in 2018? The market crash hit Dad's firm, hard clients were pulling out. You thought Nathan helped with that mysterious refinancing that saved you from foreclosure? I paused, letting the memory resurface in their minds. Zenith Holdings, the company that bought your mortgage and restructured it at below market rates. That was me. I couldn't watch you lose your home, even as you spent family dinners lamenting my lack of ambition. Father's face had gone ashen. The partnership thought I had connections. They made me senior partner because of that deal. The realization that his career advancement had been built on my invisible foundation hit him visibly. Madison. I continued, turning to my sister. Your boutique's investor didn't discover you at a fashion show. There was no fashion show. You were 3 days from bankruptcy, crying on my couch about how you'd failed. Phoenix Investments was me working through offshore accounts to maintain anonymity. Every algorithm that optimizes your inventory, every predictive model that tells you what to stock, I built those after hours while you posted about your self-made success. Madison's perfect makeup couldn't hide her shock. But the investor meetings, the presentations, actors, I confirmed. Hired to play the role so you'd never know, because I wanted you to feel the pride of building something even if I had to give you the tools and funding to do it. That's what family does, or what I thought it did. Nathan straightened in his chair, perhaps sensing what was coming. Your MBA loans, I said, meeting his eyes. Sally Mae didn't randomly select you for full forgiveness. The Educational Excellence Foundation that paid them off 3 guesses who founded it. You gave a commencement speech about perseverance and earning your success through merit. The merit was being my brother, nothing more. You manipulated us, Nathan said, but his accusation lacked conviction. You let us believe lies. I let you believe what you wanted to believe, I corrected. Every single one of you was drowning, and I threw you life rafts disguised as luck, talent, or connections. Because admitting your dropout sister saved you would have been unbearable for your egos. But I'm done enabling your delusions. Grace moved closer to me, a gesture of support that didn't go unnoticed. Mr. and Mrs. Mitchell, she said formally, your daughter has donated over $50 million to various causes. She's funded education for thousands, saved companies employing hundreds of thousands, and revolutionized industries that improve millions of lives. And she did it all while you told her she was a failure. What does that say about your values? We didn't know, Mother whispered, but even she seemed to realize how hollow it sounded. You didn't ask, Marcus Chen interjected. In my culture, we have a saying, the lotus flower blooms most beautifully from the deepest mud. Your daughter bloomed despite you, not because of you. I pulled out my phone, showing them something I'd prepared months ago, but never had the courage to send. This is an email I drafted after last Thanksgiving, when Uncle Frank suggested I consider night school for a bookkeeping certificate. I read aloud. Dear family, I want you to know that I love you despite everything. I've built a career I'm proud of, even if you can't see it. I'm happy, fulfilled, and making a difference in ways that matter to me. I don't need your approval anymore. I just need you to stop trying to fix what isn't broken. Why didn't you send it? Father asked, and for the first time, I heard genuine curiosity rather than accusation in his voice, because I realized even that was seeking validation. I needed you to accept me, not my achievements. But you've shown tonight that the two are inseparable in your minds. When you thought I was nobody to you. Now that you know I'm somebody in your value system, you want to claim me. But I'm the same person I was an hour ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago. The only thing that changed was your perception. Grace turned to Nathan, removing her engagement ring with deliberate slowness. I've learned something valuable tonight, she said, placing the ring on the table in front of him. Success isn't about titles or bank accounts or family pedigree. It's about character integrity and how you treat people when you think they have nothing to offer you. Your sister has all of that. You, Nathan, have shown me you have none of it. Nathan sputtered, reaching for her hand, but Grace stepped away. We're done. I won't marry someone who could have a sister like Dania and see only failure. If you could miss her worth so completely, what else are you blind to? The broken engagement seemed to shatter the last of the family's composure. Madison fled to the bathroom in tears, Brittany trailing after her. Uncle Frank and Aunt Cheryl quietly gathered their things, unable to meet anyone's eyes. Other relatives dispersed, mumbling excuses about early mornings and babysitters. Dania. Mother made one last attempt, her voice broken. What do you want from us? Nothing, I said simply. For the first time in my life, I want absolutely nothing from any of you. I'm going to continue my work, continue helping people who need it, continue measuring success by impact rather than imagery. You're welcome to be part of my life, but only if you can see me as I am not as you wish I were, or as you failed to recognize I could be. I gathered my things, the simple purse that had embarrassed them earlier, now feeling like armor. Marcus, thank you for your kind words. Grace? I'm sorry about your engagement, but I think you've dodged a bullet. Everyone else. I addressed the remaining guests, many still recording. Thank you for witnessing this. Maybe it will remind us all to look deeper than surface success, to value substance over style. As I walked toward the exit, I heard chairs scraping and footsteps. Grace caught up first, followed by Marcus. Dania, Grace said, slightly breathless. I know this is terrible timing, but I've been studying your code for 2 years. Would you consider teaching me? Not hiring me, just mentoring. I want to learn from the best. Despite everything, I smiled. Coffee tomorrow. There's a little place near my apartment where I do my best thinking. The one with the terrible lighting and amazing cortados, Grace asked, then blushed. I may have done some reconnaissance trying to find DM. Marcus joined us, his expression serious. My offer stands, Dania, not for employment, but for partnership. True partnership. Your vision properly funded, no anonymity required unless you prefer it. Think about it. As we reached the door, I turned back one last time. My family sat among the ruins of their carefully constructed evening, their worldview shattered by truths they'd been too proud to see. Nathan held the engagement ring like a foreign object. My parents clutched each other, looking older than I'd ever seen them. Madison had returned her makeup destroyed, looking lost. 6 months later, the ripple effects of that night were still expanding. Grace and I had indeed become business partners, launching a foundation that taught coding to underserved communities. We'd expanded beyond boot camps to include mentorship programs, with Grace handling operations while I developed curriculum. Our first graduating class had a 100% placement rate with starting salaries that would have impressed even my status-conscious family. Nathan's career at Goldman Sachs had stalled. Word of Grace's very public dumping had spread through their social circles, along with the reason for it. Turns out being exposed as someone who couldn't recognize talent in his own family wasn't great for a career built on supposedly identifying value. He'd sent several emails asking for help, which I'd answered politely but firmly. I'd help him the same way he'd helped me with condescending advice about building character through struggle. Madison's boutique survived, but her influencer career hadn't. The internet had been merciless about her TikTok, mocking me, creating memes about dropout Dania's revenge. She'd tried to spin it as a reconciliation story, but without my participation, it rang hollow. Last I heard, she was actually focusing on design rather than social media, possibly the first authentic thing she'd done in years. My parents had attempted contact numerous times. Flowers on my birthday, the first they'd sent in 5 years, Christmas gifts returned unopened, even showing up at my apartment building, politely turned away by security I'd warned in advance. Father had tried to use legal channels to establish some claim to my work, arguing parental investment, but quickly dropped it when Marcus's legal team responded. Mother had pivoted to playing the victim, telling anyone who'd listen about her ungrateful daughter who'd abandoned family. But for every family member who'd failed to see me, there were dozens of others who did. My inbox filled with messages from people whose lives had been touched by my work employees, whose jobs I'd saved, patients whose diagnoses had been caught by my algorithm students who'd found careers through programs I'd funded. These strangers saw my worth more clearly than my blood ever had. On a rainy Tuesday, I sat in my favorite coffee shop, the one with terrible lighting and amazing cortados, teaching a group of bootcamp students about recursive functions. One young woman struggling with the concept suddenly lit up as understanding dawned. It's like each function contains a smaller version of itself, right? Like those Russian dolls. Exactly, and I encouraged her. You're getting it. You're such a good teacher, she said, then added shyly. My mom says you're like a superhero saving companies and stuff. Is that true? I thought about the costume of anonymity I'd worn for so long, about the secret identity of DM that had protected me from my family's inability to see my worth. No, I said, finally smiling. I'm just someone who refused to let others define my worth, and that's a power everyone has if they choose to use it. She nodded thoughtfully and returned to her code. Through the rain-streaked window, I caught sight of Nathan across the street collar, turned up against the weather, looking somehow diminished from the golden boy who'd offered me career advice. Our eyes met briefly before he hurried on, and I felt nothing. No anger, no satisfaction, just the peace of someone who'd finally stopped seeking approval from those incapable of giving it. My phone buzzed with a text from Grace. Legal documents for the new Singapore expansion ready for review. Also found an amazing dim sum place. Working lunch. I confirmed, then returned my attention to my students. These eager learners building skills that would change their lives were my family now. Not bound by blood, but by choice, curiosity, and mutual respect. The family that had said I failed had shown me something valuable that night at the engagement party. Sometimes the greatest success is discovering who truly deserves a place in your life. As the coffee shop filled with the afternoon rush, I helped my students debug their code, each error message a chance to learn rather than a failure to hide. Outside, the rain continued to fall on a city full of problems waiting to be solved, and I had work to do. The end. Thank you for joining me on this emotional journey of hidden success and family revelation. If you've ever felt underestimated by those closest to you, remember that your worth isn't determined by others' recognition. Share your own stories of overcoming family doubts in the comments below. What achievements have you kept private, and why? Don't forget to like this video if it resonated with you. Subscribe for more stories of triumph over adversity, and share it with someone who needs to hear that their worth isn't defined by their family's expectations. Until next time, keep believing in yourself, even when no one else does.